Hello, everyone. Welcome to IT Tech Talk. I'm your host, Joel Ward, and tuning in with me today is Doug. Doug, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm fabulous. It's great weather. It's a nice day. It was an easy day at work, and I've got one day left of work, so I'm pretty happy. So Doug,
Beautiful.
I was so excited to get you on the show. We've had a couple reschedules just because of different things going on in life and stuff.
Mhm.
So I'm fine. I'm glad we finally got to do this. So Doug, for my listeners, you are the host of the podcast Terminal Value.
That's correct.
And you also are, I'm assuming you work, or that is currently what you do? Is that the only thing you do, or is there other stuff you do?
Oh, goodness gracious, no. I'm the host of the Terminal Value podcast. In addition to that, I do B2B expense reduction consulting for mid-sized companies where I help them restructure their contracts to drive savings. In addition to that, I also do consulting, risk mitigation, and business model consulting for startups. And in addition to that, there's also a IT recruiting agency that I do business development for. So I'm a man who juggles mini balls. In addition to that, I also my wife and I have two kids, 16 and daughter 16, son 13, two dogs, two cats, and nine chickens.
Oh my goodness, you are definitely keeping it busy.
Yeah,
How do you find
one can say
time?
so.
Okay, so people ask me, how do you find time for like writing your books or working on your business or working full time or doing the podcast? How do you
Uh-huh.
manage your time? Like that's a question I like to ask people because
Yeah.
like when they tell me they have all this stuff, how do you manage your time? How do you make things work?
So basically the way that I do it is so number one is I figure out how to automate and outsource as much as I can. Number two is that I have to prioritize very aggressively, which basically means that at a certain point in the afternoon, whatever I'm working on just stops and waits until the next morning. And a number of days I get going very early, like around 4 o'clock in the morning, in order to try to capture what I call magic time.
Yeah, so the way I do it is I take care of the kids. In the evening, I do a lot of my majority of emailing and stuff. When I'm at
Yeah,
work, I sometimes, because my family owns the business, I
yeah.
do a lot of my majority of my work sometimes at work while on my breaks and stuff. I catch up on emails, I send calls, I do all that stuff. And I actually in the mornings I am driving for the company, so I do
Yeah.
a lot of I'm on the road for about 6 hours in the morning. So on the road, if I stop somewhere, I send emails or I make calls or I do Zoom calls and stuff or whatever in the car driving
Yeah.
and I get things done. And then for the podcast, I set aside from 2 o'clock p.m. till 3 o'clock is my time. And
Uh-huh.
sometimes I do later calls and I have to schedule that in. I have to make it work. But most of the time I make everything work. And my side projects like my book and stuff,
Yeah.
my books and stuff, I managed that by writing it in the time I had. So I
Mhm.
definitely understand. It's like with kids and stuff, it's so hard to get good timing to do stuff and you got to manage your time well. So
Yes.
Doug, with terminal value, how long have you been doing terminal value? I've been doing my podcast for about a year. I think you've been doing yours a little bit longer.
Yeah.
How long exactly have you been doing terminal value?
I started in September of 2020,
So you've been doing it for um
almost 2 years.
almost 2 years. Yeah.
Yes.
So what is your I've listened to your show. What is the
Uh-huh.
premise of your show? For my listeners, what is terminal value? What do you do on the podcast?
Sure. So the podcast is based around one big question, and that is what do, as I say, value obsessed leaders need to do to transform their business to world class? And that can really take one of two flavors. Flavor A is you have an existing business that you're trying to get out of the just like everybody else itis into and transform it to a world class company. Another is where you have something that you're starting up from scratch and you're trying to build it into a world class company. But then what I do is inside of that wrapper, I host interviews with thought leaders, executives, all around the different facets of building and creating a world-class company and life for that matter. Because this is another one of the things that I've become sensitized to as I've gotten older is that in the old days, we all used to think, okay, well, you have your personal life and then you have your business life and they're not connected. And that's actually nonsense. The truth of the matter is it's all melded inside of a life soup. And if you have if your personal life is a mess, but your business life looks like it's just fine, it's only a matter of time before those two things bleed over, and vice versa.
I can totally relate. So I've had to, in my professional and personal life, they've been melded together. In
Yes.
my personal life, I try and keep it very professional so that when my people in the professional life see me, they realize this guy is still the same person as he is in his
Yeah.
personal life and professional life. And I try and keep that same aura
Yeah.
across the board. And it's so hard though, because sometimes you're like, oh, you'll do something in public and you're like, oh, I hope nobody saw me because I don't want them to know that because I professionally and it's not like it's like when I'm goofing off my kids and stuff, that's one thing. But if
Yeah.
you do something that goes like it doesn't look professional, like and I try and keep a very, very professional profile in public, in my writings, on
Yeah.
Facebook, and that's one of the things I wanted to bring up off that off what you were saying when people are having a hard time melding those, like, so say your Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or even TikTok is a mess and it's your
Hmm.
personal one, and your business TikTok, your business Instagram is perfect. How do you go about trying to fix that, trying to make it so you're not posting things that go against the professional lifestyle and make people think, oh, this guy, I don't want to hire this guy? So what would you recommend for someone to like change that aspect of their life?
What I would actually say is don't change it. Make your business about around who you actually are. And I didn't always feel this way. But again, this is one of the benefits of aging is your time allows you to see through your prior bouts of nonsense. Is that I spent a disturbing amount of my the first half of my life trying to be what I thought other people wanted me to be, and at some point you just have to be who you are. And if that results in a few less clients, or if that results in slower growth, it is better to be who you are than to live a life that's fake, because you're going to have to pay the piper of a fake life eventually. And it will come at some, either some kind of major psychological breakdown, some kind of self-induced, self-destructive activities, all of the above. There is no happy ending to living a fake life. And I think that's a big part of what's happened with I can't call it anything but a mental health crisis that's resulted from COVID.
I totally agree. So how I explain it is like my thing is when I'm posting personally, it's about my kids. It's
Yeah.
a quick little post about something going on in my life, or it's about my business, or it's about something going on. That's how I keep my posts regular. There's no memes, there's no
Yeah.
political stuff. And if there is religious stuff, it's very minimal and it's very quiet. I try to keep my professional side on my thing, and it's not to be fake. It's to keep that side personal. So like if I don't publicize my drama, and
Yeah.
I don't like to publicize other people's drama. So if I'm going to post to Facebook, it's going to be about my kids. It's going to be about, if it's on Twitter, it's about different things. I use Twitter to reach out to clients
Hmm.
and stuff. So it's very professional. I use my personal side of things to reach a lot of people. So I don't want to be irresponsible with my posts.
Yeah.
Whereas
Yeah.
people are like, I don't want to hire this guy, or I don't want to work with this guy. And I 100% agree with the COVID thing, because COVID has made people totally totally mix everything together, and they're
Yeah.
all a mess, and so many people are struggling still to keep themselves together. And I really agree with the mental health thing. There's such a
Yeah.
mental health crisis right now in the world,
Yeah.
and just especially in business and professional, especially for a
Yeah.
lot of like startups and stuff, and people who own their
Hmm.
own business. It's very, because people are trying to manage their personal life, manage their professional life, and they're struggling because COVID hit people hard because of the financial issues and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different mental aspects that play into it. So I 100% agree with that.
And if I can actually just interject really
No, yeah,
quick.
yeah, go ahead.
One thing I was thinking as you were talking is that so the way that I like to think about posting things on social media is that, okay, so social media, well, of course, first understand that the purpose of social media is to keep users engaged on the platform and clicking on the platform. That's what Zuckerberg and all the other people have designed it for. The way that I try to create my social media presence is thinking, okay, if I post something, is it of useful value to anybody else? You're either somebody who is interested in seeing what's happening with my kids, or is going to provide some sort of information, some sort of insight, some sort of information. If it is just attention or validation seeking for me, that doesn't provide value to anybody else but me. And the only thing that it's doing is showing the world that I'm getting that much closer to being a full pattern narcissist.
I love that. I love that you took that and ran off that my question, my answer. The one of the things I actually like to do, and I think this plays into what you were just talking about, is when I post things, especially when it's like personal stuff. It's
Mhm.
if my friends say, "Hey, I have my business. I really have this great product," or my buddy just started his own coffee line, and he was talking to me about it, and he was like, he's actually probably gonna go on the show, and he's probably gonna I'm gonna do an ad for him.
Yeah.
But the one thing was, I was like, dude, give me a link, give me all the information. I'm gonna post about it. I'm gonna share it, and like you said, sharing information,
Yeah.
giving someone value. Or my friend, she is going to be an esthetician. I'm always constantly uplifting her on there, tagging her in something
Yeah.
because we wrote 2 books together.
Uh-huh.
Actually, no, yeah, we wrote 2 books together. I was thinking it was 3. For
Okay.
some reason, I thought it was 3. And like, I'm constantly posting and sharing our book is going to be an audiobook here soon.
Yeah.
And I'm like constantly tagging her, uplifting her. It's constantly what I consider social media is there's so many people putting people down, whereas we should be
Hmm.
uplifting those around us and bringing a community of people together to share stories, to share links, to share businesses, to use it
Yeah.
and provide uh, a social presence that helps other people. So I
Yeah.
100% agree with what you were just saying. So I like that.
Well, and also I would add that, if you're talking about, because people say, oh, well, say like Facebook is where you go for socializing. I go, no, where you go for socializing is where there's actually other people present. Um, and if you think that anything you do in front of a computer screen constitutes socializing, you're just lying to yourself.
Yeah, I love that because there's a lot of people who think that they create all this content for YouTube and Facebook,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok,
Yeah.
and at the end of
Guilty.
the yeah, well, and I'm guilty of that too. But at the end of the day, they're like, like, what is their like? You see them on TikTok, you see them on Facebook. Like, what is their social life like? Or do they actually go out and meet people? Do they actually go out and talk to their fans? Do they actually reach out to people? That's
Hmm.
and one of the things that I've actually talked about in my paid subscription thing
Uh-huh.
is about, YouTubers and TikTokers, the bigger they are, like they forget totally about their fan base and they forget who got them started. A
Yeah.
couple not TikTokers, YouTubers I've reached out to that I've been fans of since they started years ago when YouTube first got started. And
Yeah.
I've reached out to them to go on my show or even to talk to them to be like, hey, what got you started? What, and they won't reach back out because they're so big now and they have
Hmm.
PR teams and they have all this money and they don't really care about the fans that really stuck with them the whole
Yeah.
time. And it bothers me because like you were saying, it's like the social aspect. Sitting in front of a computer screen, sitting in front of a camera, sitting in front of that phone is not a social scene. Going out, meeting your fans, hosting a gathering or even like a meet and greet or even a Zoom call where people can meet you, like setting that up and maybe meeting people like to talk to them, to get to know your fans and get to know people, or even going on shows like small shows and stuff and getting people to be like,
Yeah.
hey, they're normal people. And yes, they are normal people. I'm not saying they're not. What I'm saying is like they spend too much time getting validation for their work that they forget that there's validation in real life. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it does. And one of the other things that I've become increasingly sensitized to is that, uh, you know, if you are dependent on anything outside of yourself for validation, it will eventually self-destruct and implode. Now, in some cases, in a lot of cases, what happens is people become dependent on validation from others. They end up not at some point not getting that validation because other people can never give you the validation that you want or need. It can only come from yourself. And so at some point, the people they'll get disappointed and then they'll go into depression. The other thing would be, say, you have the influencer model, which is where they seek that external validation and they get it. Now they become addicted to it and they become dependent on it, which will eventually result in a similar self-destructive cycle. It will just be a larger, more publicly viewable blow up, which is basically if you follow any of the celebrities or influencers, which I try not to, but to the extent that you do, you'll see that in any given day there's somewhere between 10 and 50 who are crashing and burning from this exact phenomenon.
And I 100% 100% agree with that. So off of that, there's one thing I think you can agree with this, which I've done so many statistics on this and read it up on it. There are so many podcasters just like you and me, and you've been doing this for
Uh-huh.
2 years. I've been doing this for a year and a half almost. And I think there's like 5 million podcasts out there. Over
Yeah.
like I think it's like 50 or 60% of those have not finished their work. Like they get started, they get to their 10th, fifth or 10th episode, and they quit.
Yeah.
Why? Because they get burnt out because they didn't realize it takes a lot of work. And some people do it for the validation. They don't get the validation and then they just quit. See,
Yeah.
my thing is part about my show, and the reason I keep going, even if my listeners don't listen to an episode, I'm like, they didn't listen to the episode. If some of my episodes they get really big, and I'm like, wow, like they really like enjoyed that. Some of the response I get from it is um is the people who I bring on. They're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you had that guest on. I learned so much. Like I really enjoyed what they had to say, what they had to offer, and I really enjoyed the content they brought to the show." And that's one of the things I do is like information. Like we were just talking about information. Like if you're posting something, it's informative. It's gives information. It gives someone something to look forward to. I am. I like to inform people like us having this conversation
Hmm.
about this stuff we're talking about. It brings information to those who may be like, I didn't even think about like that. And I like to bring information. That's why I wrote my books. Like it's
Yeah.
stuff, it's my thoughts, it's what I've written or thought about for years, and I wanted to write and give information to people who are like, oh, I didn't think about it like that. Like there's so many books out there, but like I try and think of like my book is a book that gives people more information than like just spewing a bunch of things that make you sound like you're arrogant. um so yeah, I try my best to give information on the show, on my Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on TikTok. So I do agree that there has to be a limit where you're sharing something that gives some kind of hope to someone. They're like, oh wow, like I didn't think about it like that. Yeah. So off of that, um, when you do your show, and
Yeah.
do you get many responses? Do people reach out to you and say, "Hey, I heard this"? Do you ask for like comments or content, like, or from people like uh, what they thought of the show? Do you ever ask for
Uh,
that?
tr Truthfully, I need to be a lot better about that. And so the short answer is that I do get some unsolicited feedback, but I don't pull in as much feedback as I really should. And a part of that is because earlier in this year I decided that I was going to go to releasing 5 episodes a week. Now, the reason why I did that is because in one of the many people whose books I read, one line that I came across was that the author said, okay, if you publish every day for a year without fail, you'll never have to worry about money again. And I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. And so what that means is that I've had to systematize a lot of what I do. In order to be able to work through, like, say, virtual assistants, et cetera, just because trying to create content and then edit plus publish 5 episodes a week is an unreal amount of work. And so one of the things that's happened from that is that I have not built in as much of that feedback mechanism as I would like to. Now, of course, that's one of the 1,000 things that's on my list to adjust. Because, like, for example, the podcast platform that I use, I can very easily append a call to action at the beginning or end of the podcast episodes. It's just something that I need to record, decide where I'm going to put it. Am I just going to do it going forward, going back? Kind of juggle it in with all the other things. And because one of the other again, attributes or deficiencies of my personality, depending on the way you look at it, is that I am constantly picking up new balls to start juggling. Just because just psychologically, I don't like to say no to opportunities until I've had a chance to at least explore it enough to figure out whether there's a way it can be workable. And the philosophically, I call that say yes and figure it out. Now, I think that that's a very, very good way to expand your productive ability because it forces you to push your boundaries. It's a very, very bad way to have a predictable, consistent business workflow.
Yeah, no. So I It's kind of funny. I actually have a hard time saying no to new projects too. One of the things that was really cool in this week was my two of my, actually no, three at this point, three of my books got picked up by
Yeah.
Audible. So I'm actually in the production phases of getting
Yeah.
these books published on Audible. And so it's like I picked up three more projects to do after
Yeah.
finishing this new subscription base for my show. I'm my business is expanding. I'm doing an online store. I'm creating merchandise for my podcast. I'm launching that store. So there's so much stuff going on. So at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I have so, like you said, so many balls I'm juggling, and I'm just like, what? People are like, how do you manage all this? I'm like, I don't really, like, it's like so hard, but you find time, you take time. Like you said, like pumping out so many episodes. I actually was pumping out an episode every day, every week. And
Yeah.
when I first started the show, and that was so draining. Now I do it like twice or three times a week, and then take
Uh-huh.
a week off and then record again. So it's like kind of like I balance it out better just because
Yeah.
I don't like feeling overwhelmed. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta record this week again. So it's like having that week to like reevaluate and get myself
Yeah.
back together and then start recording or start doing what I need to do. So it's like taking a mini vacation. Yeah, I'm at work still in my full-time job, but I still have the ability to take time for myself.
Got
Um
it. Well, and so one thing that I'd say kind of along that route is that I was headed toward that kind of really feeling, overwhelmed and everything. And the mental switch that triggered in my head was that, once you let go of your desire for things to feel in control and predictable, which is hard for a lot of people to do. But if you let go of that and just understand that it's going to be what it's going to be, you're going to get as much done as you possibly can. You'll prioritize and always understand that there's going to be things left on the to-do list. Once you make that switch mentally, then you become a stress camel. Then there's not really, then it's like, as long as your life is not literally in danger, as long as you are not literally being kicked out of your house or or things are not literally on fire, then there's really nothing that can hurt you.
No, I 100% agree. That's awesome. So, Doug, I want to start wrapping up the show because I know you've got a couple meetings coming up here. One of the questions I ask every guest at the end of the show,
Yeah.
and it's one of the things I continually like to ask, is when you got your show up and running, when you got to the point where you're at in life, is there something you wish younger you would have known where you are now, younger you wishes they had known?
So the thing that I wish younger me had known was start earlier. So I put about 20 years into my corporate career before taking the entrepreneurial journey, and the problem that I ran into with that was that if you're in a corporate career, as you progress, you start making more money, which is great, except that when you decide to start a business, it does not grow to a mid to high six-figure salary overnight. There's a ramp up. And so I would say definitely start earlier, particularly because you will learn a lot. You learn a lot through the process, and the money is actually less important than I think a lot of people believe. I mean, don't get me wrong. Money is extremely important for being able to do a lot of things in life. But after a certain point, which is actually pretty low point, a fairly low point from an absolute income perspective, it all it really does is facilitate you being able to further complicate your life, which of course, that's something that I'd like to have the ability to do. But generally speaking, right, the you can be quite content with a fairly modest amount of money, particularly if you're doing something that you actually enjoy. And because this is the other light bulb moment in my life, because I had always thought that, okay, I need to have a practical career path, practical degree, so that I can get a good job and keep getting raises, so that I can accumulate a whole bunch of money for retirement, so that at some point between my late 50s and my mid 60s, when I either get forced to retire or get laid off and I can't find another job, I'll have enough money so that I can afford to retire. That's all predicated on the idea that I'm doing something I don't like. I go, okay, well, what if, on the other hand, I put something together that I do like, that I can do from wherever I'm at, and that I can basically do for as long as I'm able to hold a cogent conversation. Well, if that's the case, then I don't need to push that outer income limit. I can be much more modest and still be perfectly fine because I don't have to stop.
I love that. I love that. So Doug, off of that, oh, just a real quick question. So you
Shoot.
started the entrepreneurial phase. Could you say you're definitely satisfied with leaving the corporate life and moving into entrepreneurial phase of your life?
Um, so yeah, I would say yes. And now in this case, in my case, what happened was I got a separation notice at the beginning of COVID because we had a new chief information officer who came in. I was a program management office director, and I was uh, I was the conduit from the old CIO to the executive suite. And the new person who came in basically wanted to be the only person who did any executive communications. So all of us who had ever been involved with the executive staff, we were all let go. And so that I ended up with that was in April 2020. So it was a big disruption from a career perspective. But looking back on it, I'm actually kind of glad that it happened that way because otherwise I could have stayed in that kind of comfortable zone and never really been shaken out to figure out what is it that I really want to do? What do I really want the rest of my life to look like? And, I think that it's, when you're in that kind of that comfy, squishy, stable income zone, it's really easy to avoid asking yourself those questions. But if you don't ask yourself those questions, then you'll end up being like the disturbing majority of people who get to the end of their so-called working life and don't know what to do because they don't really know what they want out of their life. The only thing that they've wanted was to be able to have enough money to live. Go, okay, well, there's nothing wrong with that, but if that's as far as the train goes, then your mind is going to atrophy over the course of about 2 to 3 years, which is statistically what happens.
Awesome. Doug, thank you so much. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you,
on the
Joel.
show. For those listening, please consider subscribing to the extra content page I have on Spotify. There is content dropping here, like more content. I have been trying to get everything pumped out. I have a lot of like editing to do of extra content, but please consider subscribing. It's $15 a month. You get access only on Spotify. You only get access on Spotify to like extra content of the show. Actually, Doug's episode will be on there. I will talk about what I thought about our conversation, different things about the conversation, how I consider different things in life off of his conversation, and
Mhm.
just tune in because I like to. It's called Let's Talk After Dark, and it's at night. So when the episode doesn't air like it does normal for this normal episode, it'll air in the evening. But you'll be able to hear like different commentary with me and my co-host about what we thought about Doug's interview and what we thought about the questions I was asked and stuff. So please tune in for that. Also, thank you for those who do subscribe. I appreciate you, and I'm really glad that you take the time to listen to the extra content. It does help. It does support the show. It does support keeping everything running because there's a lot of upkeep to the show. So thank you so much for subscribing. Doug, thanks again for coming on the show. It was such an honor.
No problem. Thank you, Joel.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Talk to you later.